Hi everyone, and welcome to the third and final day of Power Women Summit 2021. My name is Alexis Wren, and I am a model, entrepreneur, and actress. I'm so excited to be here today. I am currently working on my mentorship program called We Are Warriors, and I'm also super excited for my new movie happening in summer 2022 with Antonio Banderas, Kate Bosworth, and 2 Chainz. Today, we're going to be celebrating women who are breaking barriers both on screen and behind the scenes. From Sarah Paulson and Cynthia Erivo to the producers of Belfast and The Power of the Dog to the costume designers of House of Gucci and Dune. We'll be joined by your favorite entrepreneurs turned reality television stars, executives who are redefining the status quo of Hollywood, and top activists who aren't afraid to speak their minds and take action. As a reminder, you can go back and rewatch any of your favorite moments from these sessions. Just go to wrapwomen.com and click Power Women Summit. On this site, you can also check out the Power Women Summit Marketplace, where you'll discover an incredible collection of vendors, artwork, and experiential activations. For those of you who upgraded to a mentorship ticket, you should have received a confirmation email with your assigned date, time, and mentor. This year's mentorship program is presented by Amazon Studios. Throughout the day, we encourage you to reach out, connect, and chat with one another via our Wrap Connect Slack channel. If you've registered for the conference, you should have received an invitation for this in your inbox. It's also still not too late to sign up. You can register at wrapwomen.com under the tab Power Women Summit. We also encourage you to share your thoughts and findings on social media. We're using the hashtag PowerWomenSummit. Feel free to tag us on Instagram at WrapWomen and Twitter at TheWrapWomen. And don't forget to sign up for the WrapWomen newsletter on the WrapWomen website and subscribe to the WrapWomen podcast, Unwrapped, on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. And of course, a huge thank you to the Power Women Summit event sponsors. We appreciate you making this event possible. First up, in today's program, we'll hear from legendary actresses Sarah Paulson and Cynthia Erivo, who joined us last week at an evening honoring the Power Women Summit and the changemakers of 2021. Sarah, who recently played Linda Tripp in Ryan Murphy's Impeachment, American Crime Story on FX, and Cynthia Erivo, who wowed audiences with her performance of Aretha Franklin in Genius, Aretha, earlier this year, spoke about ambition, self-actualization, and pushing the limits of societal expectations. Let's take a look.
She's here. Kiss to you. Okay.
I'm kissing you. Hi, everyone.
Hi.
Hi.
Okay, so this is definitely one of the craziest things we've ever tried. So we're going to try it, though. It was Sarah's idea, and Cynthia it's like 4 in the friggin' morning in London. Can I just tell you?
It is 4:10 exactly.
Say again?
4:10 exactly.
4:10 exactly. Thank you from our hearts for waking up. I can't imagine why in the world you wanted to be here, but I think I know because we started a conversation, Sarah, with us about female ambition and the limits of female ambition, and why that is. Why is that, Sarah? Let's just jump right on in.
Why there's a limitation?
Well, let's just say that there is some indications and sort of signaling in the culture, perhaps, that there should be limits to what you want to do as an actress or what Cynthia wants to do. And I think that we started talking about this in regard to your portrayal of Linda Tripp in Impeachment. And so why don't I let you tell it, because you'll tell it better.
I guess I'm interested in the conversation about ambition as it pertains to women because I'm constantly confronted with my own feelings about it when I'm around other women. And sometimes what I think my knee-jerk response can be to seeing a supremely confident woman walk into the room and sort of take the stage and take the space and own her right to be there, and how immediately I get so insecure about why I'm not able to do that confidently and comfortably. And I realized I then immediately turn that on the person and decide, oh, well, they're just some kind of like really crazy, confident person. And I turn it into a flaw. And I'm sort of interested in this idea as women, how we can find a way to sort of support the idea of ambition and take away some of the sort of societally imposed negative connotation when you think about the work of women versus the work of men. And the desire to do good work and powerful work and important work. I feel men, certainly in our industry, are often celebrated for their desire to do great work. And sometimes I feel it can be misconstrued when a woman wants to endeavor to do the same thing.
Well, when you say define great by great, and Cynthia, jump on in here, I mean, you mean defined by certain parameters that are acceptable in some way.
Yeah, I mean, I guess often as women, and I'll be specific to myself, as Black women, you're sort of required to do work that is good and safe, and when you do work that's good and safe, it doesn't really make anyone feel uncomfortable, because most people are used to you being the good and safe person on screen that you can rely on and make yourself feel better with, as opposed to those complicated characters that make you have to question the moral gray areas of everybody's life that we are all privy to. And so when you realize that that's the thing that isn't the norm, even though it's the norm in reality, it can be daunting to take the step and allow yourself to step into those roles. And I guess I agree with Sarah in that we have to find a way to start celebrating those roles and encouraging ourselves to keep challenging people to give us the space to do those roles, to create those roles as well, because that's really the only way we can see the full scope of color in us. And it's also the only way we can explore our talents and how we can actually change ideas about what womanhood is.
And I sort of think it requires the audience, not you specifically the audience, but an audience to show up for that. It's not something being done in a vacuum, I think. Ideally, when done in the most creative and collaborative way possible, you kind of need the audience to be willing to look at some uncomfortable things on screen that then might sort of illuminate things that they're struggling with themselves, or I think. Well,
so Sarah, you have a really broad array of characters that you've played, and you said something really interesting when we were.
Sorry, it's a very weird chair.
Yeah.
My mic pack is sort of dictating that I must sit up straight.
You must sit up straight. Do you want a different chair?
Yeah, if you could swap the chair, it'd be so great. Okay.
Can't do that.
No.
Okay.
Got to go.
But the sentiment.
Gotta go. No, just kidding.
Okay.
Sorry.
To bring it back seriously, and sorry about the chair. You were talking, when we were discussing this earlier, about your role, and we're going to get to Linda Tripp in a minute, in 12 Years a Slave, and you, in which you played a slave owner, actually, the wife, on a plantation. The movie is brutal, absolutely brutal. And you said that you're not that person, but that some people would not have taken that role.
Yeah,
friends of yours,
I know some friends of mine, actresses who were approached about auditioning or meeting, and they said to me that they were very surprised I was willing to do it, because they thought it was not career suicide, but at that point I was like, I don't even know what career, I don't even know what that means. I just know here's an opportunity for me to act with one of the great directors I believe that we have. I know Cynthia's worked with him as well. I think he's such an extraordinary person and an excellent filmmaker. But for me, it is more interesting to explore my own ugliness, personally, me, Sarah, the gnarly tree that lives inside me that is complicated and not always of pure thought and deed. you know. If I acknowledge that in myself, then I can play the part authentically and unapologetically, because Steve McQueen said to me, I think we said this when we were talking, he said to me, if you judge her, if you try to soft pedal this, you will weaken the ultimate importance of this story. Because if you try to make it something where we see a moment of your regret, or, you know, it's all that is about is your own ego with the audience and making sure that, you know, someone doesn't actually think you to be this kind of woman. But it hurts the story. And my job is there to help this storyteller realize this and to give the audience a glimpse back into a time in our country's history that is really, really terrifying to examine, but imperative that we do.
So in what way, and I want to ask this to each of you, do you feel that even though we have made strides in gender equality, and I talked about some of the statistics and the larger number of roles available to women, and playing Aretha, that's certainly about as exciting a role as you can get, and challenging, but also exciting, right?
Yes, for me to watch it.
That for you to watch it, for example.
Yes.
Yeah, and also many of us to say like, well, why did it take this long to even do a project like that? But what is in the culture that holds you back? I mean, you can make those decisions yourself. Yes, I'm going to play a slave owner's wife. Yes, I'm going to put on a fat suit and play Linda Tripp because that's what the role requires. And that is, it's not me. So who is telling you, or what is the signaling that you're getting that makes you feel like for some reason it's not approved, or it's not sanctioned, or it's not desired of you, for example? I'm going to ask each of you that, but.
I think there are many different sort of like levels that dictate what is required, or what's necessary, or what can be done. Whether it be a studio head when you're pitching something, and this woman might be slightly complicated, and if the feedback is, well, can we? Maybe that moment with her son isn't quite right, or maybe this person could be a little bit more, easy to deal with. Is the morality of this person a bit too far? You know, often it's sort of, it might be that, it might be yourself. You might be stopping yourself in ways, or because we're so used to seeing sort of uncomplicated women now. We're sort of moving towards complicated women, but we've been so used to seeing easy, happy-go-lucky, good people when it comes to women. When it comes to even mothers, it's like uncomplicated mothers who seem to be perfect and get it right all the time, which is unfair to real mothers who have to figure it out every single day. And often, if our audiences are used to seeing that, then we keep feeding that to our audiences, as opposed to letting the audiences see what the everyday is like for many different women around the world. But it starts at the top, to be honest, whether it be a studio head or an exec who is in the room when you're pitching something. It starts with them being brave enough to say, yeah, we'll do something different with you. We'll do something that feels dangerous. We'll do something that doesn't feel particularly nice, or feel particularly sunny, or doesn't end in the happy ending at the end of it, and we don't see this woman as a hero. Or she doesn't have to be a hero. She might be an anti-hero. She might be just a normal, everyday person who lives in the gray areas of life. But often we simplify what women can be. They're either the evil stepmother or the heroine, and there's nothing in between, which tends to be what happens when you sit in these rooms, and that's what people want. And so it sort of takes a Sarah, and it takes a me, and it takes a Liesl, who I know is sitting in the audience, to decide to paint complicated pictures of who we are, so that we get a three-dimensional view of the lives we live. We sort of have to be brave enough to force it on people, to be honest.
You were really hurt by some of the things people wrote about your, I don't know if it was about your performance as Linda Tripp or your choice to play Linda Tripp.
Well, I hope it, I think it was probably a healthy combination of both. And I think there were a couple people who thought it was good. I'm just kidding. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah.
I thought it was great.
Thank you. That's really the one that matters to me, so thank you. Thank you.
But from a particular perspective you shouldn't be playing
there
her.
was that felt particularly gender specific.
Right.
And I couldn't get a sense whether it was me, woman Sarah Paulson, or just woman in general. We talked about this a little bit, but it did hurt my feelings, but partly because it felt, as often happens when you're criticized for your work or when you're celebrated too. It can happen in the reverse as well. But it's very hard to not personalize, and it's very hard to not want to say, but do you know that I just spent 2 years of my life and that I gained 30 pounds to play this part, and that I slept, breathed, wept, bled Linda Tripp for 2 years. So for you to sit down at your computer and decide that this endeavor was maybe not worthwhile, and that maybe I shouldn't have been the one to play it, is so hurtful and also wrong. Because one of the great things about what we do is there is an opportunity for interpretation that is up to the individual. Cynthia's Aretha is different than someone else's Aretha. But if we don't have her interpretation and her lens and her worldview and her heart and her mind engaged with that performance, we don't have the beautiful end of that. We don't get to digest that performance and take all of that in, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And so you could say that, I think, about any great performance ever, or any shitty performance. Can I say shitty? They can be interpreted in a million ways. It's why when we go to see a Broadway play and we're seeing the 40th production of The Glass Menagerie, but we're so excited to see, whomever's playing. I did this play with Jessica Lange, and I can't remember what's her name. Anybody? Not Laura. I played Laura. Karen? Did somebody say? It's not Karen. Anyway, Laurette Taylor played her. I literally can't remember my mother's the character's name. Anyway, I digress. But the point is, the interpretation is all. There's a wonderful letter from Martha Graham to Agnes DeMille about being an artist and keeping the channel open, and to not shut yourself down to your experiences and the things that move you, because there's only one of you in all of time. And if you shut it down, the world will not have it. And you have to imagine that something I've experienced in life may make me just the right person to play Linda Tripp. And maybe nobody knows what that thing is. And it's not because I betrayed a friend. I didn't do that. But I'm just saying, it's very easy to just sort of chuck something off maybe someone spent 2 hours writing a review, but I like to imagine it was like 20 minutes while eating a potato chip, like doing something. I don't know. That probably wasn't what happened.
Let's back up for 1 second.
Yeah.
What made you want to take that role, which is, it's not an attractive role as a person.
It was to me. I mean, it was to me.
But
yes.
as a person, she is a villain in the story of our national.
Yeah, but not to me. It's not. I take this thing that Steve McQueen said to me as one of the greatest jewels and gifts I've ever been given, which he said, "Do not judge your character. Don't do it." Because they're not. By the way, if you're doing something honest and truthful, you're not in constant self-reflection about every move you're making. When you're watching something, you tend to parse it out and break it down, villain, good, a person living that life is not thinking they're doing something evil or bad. But to me, it was the acting challenge of my life, and heretofore it has been that. And the response to it has been all over the map, and I welcome it, honestly, because that means I did my job. It means that, I showed up and did my job, and you like it or you don't, it doesn't really matter to me. It meant the world to me to get to do it. And it expanded me as an actor.
Because it was hard.
Because it was the hardest thing I've ever done.
And why was it the hardest thing?
Physically, emotionally, trying to understand what was ultimately, just inexplicable to me. Some of the things that she did made no sense. How was I going to try to find the why in there? And also this idea that what you do on your very worst day, the very worst choice you've ever made in your life, will define you completely. Yeah. And of course, the consequences in this story were, for one woman's life, Monica Lewinsky, were devastating. But the idea that you would be judged forever by doing something that you probably regret now, would be a horrible thing. You know, I imagine there are things you've done, or Cynthia, that you've done, that if you look back and you think about the person you harmed and you could take it back, you would, you know, and this just happened to happen on a national stage.
But the thing that struck me most when we were talking about this was that the way this criticism came at you, it made, and I think this is the point, the reason why we're here talking about this tonight, is it made you question whether you would take on a challenging role of that kind again.
Yeah. It's very vulnerable making. I'm sure you've experienced this too, Cynthia. You know, everybody in this room probably has. You spend a lot of time working on something and you give your heart to it. And so it is hard to imagine doing it again. I have not had children, but I think about women saying, like, after childbirth, never again. And then they're like, I had 15 more children and it's great. You know, so the part of the pain is the gift in a lot of ways. Yeah. And so I do think you learn more from what is a purported failure, whether it's, you know, I will never regret doing it. I would wish I had a 42 Linda Tripp opportunities in my life. I would hopefully take every single one of them, but I have to be honest with you and say that it will probably be a tiny moment of, do I dare, you know? Do I dare put myself out there again like that? Because it was a big swing. I know it, you know, but I went up to bat, the ball came towards my face and I hit it. And that's all I know, you know? I showed up for the assignment. That's what I did.
Yeah, and I think it's...
I like it.
You like her.
I like her. I love her. I love her so much. I think she's such a wild talent and an extraordinary human being. And we're so lucky to be alive at a time when she's doing the work she's doing. That's how I feel.
That's nice.
I love you. Thank you.
Pretty hard to argue.
No, it's impossible to argue. Yeah, we have to find something to do together. We talk about this.
Oh,
yes.
God.
I promise to do something together. I really mean it.
Do I say you know?
I made a promise that we would do something together, and Sarah might not know this about me, but I'm really, really determined. So she doesn't actually have a choice.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
I'm counting on it.
We know you're very determined, Cynthia. Let's turn a little bit to the equity question when it comes to money, because this is another important area where women in the industry have struggled to get the respect
what they deserve,
and they deserve. Yes, which should be equal pay for equal work.
Correct.
Cynthia, what has been your experience of that, and how?
It's really bloody hard. That's the experience. It's really bloody hard. It's always a fight. It's always, you spend so much time explaining why you're worth the money that you're worth. And it makes it really difficult to step on a set when you think that you had to struggle to get the thing that you deserve. I don't know why we're still in this space in 2021. It doesn't make sense. I know that I'm willing to keep fighting, and I'm lucky enough to have a team that sort of will stick with me through everything and try and get what it is that I need in order to tell the story. Because I think often what is sort of discounted is how much work goes on around the film. The film or the TV show or whatever is the pleasure. Like, you can do your work. The work is, you get paid for the work that you're doing, yes, right. But you also get paid for what you particularly bring to the project. And then you're also supposed to be paid for the thing that you have to do for the project itself afterwards, and the promotion of it, and the long hours, and the flights that you take, and all of the things that make the film or the project or whatever work after you've been standing on set for hours and days and months. That all is work that doesn't get paid for after the fact. So if you're doing a 6-month film and you're paid, and you're number one on the set, let's say, and you're paid, I don't know, $2 million or something, and you realize that your male counterpart is paid 4 or 6, you sort of think to yourself, well, why aren't we equal? Why aren't we making the same amount? Because we're here pretty much the same amount of time. We have to give the same amount of energy, and we have to give of ourselves after. And that is a loose. Say again.
Are you speaking about a specific?
This particularly, that was just an example out of the blue. But there are examples where I know I've been paid a hell of a lot less than my male counterparts, or than an example who's doing comparably the same thing. And we're sort of stuck in a place, and I'm sort of trying to get my team, who's willing to go the distance, to just keep working with people to get what is worth.
I have to ask, if do you want to share anything specific? Not that we would tell anyone.
I don't know if I want to share something specific, but there is something I'm sort of like working on right now that doesn't feel like it's coming to what I need it to come up to. And I know that there are people who are, men who are doing roles that are comparable to that particular role, and they are paid 3 times, 4 times what they've offered me. But that's not an odd occurrence. That's something that's a regular occurrence.
What do you think can be done? What do we do about that?
I mean, I think I feel like it will take for us as women, when these roles come up, to sometimes to say no, to like not be afraid to say no, that's not what I'm worth, and I can't do that. And there is, and there is obviously the fear that if I say no, will I be able to work again? But I do think there is a strength in numbers thing that we sometimes forget exists. And so I think sometimes we think that we're working within a silo, but actually there's a whole slew of us sort of dealing with the same situation. But if we never line up together, if we never come to the same like start point and go, okay, let's just together as a team decide that if this is not right, I say no. We can never sort of create a unit. Do you know what I'm saying? And I think that's actually what it's going to take.
We have had instances where men have stepped up and asked that their female counterparts be paid the same or more.
It doesn't happen enough. And I don't believe that we can rely on that. It doesn't happen enough.
We need the men too. We need them to help too.
Yeah. What has been your experience on this question of pay equity?
I've worked with a lot of women. So, we've all just been going, I don't think we're making enough money. But it hasn't been so much. There's actually a producer I worked with in this room on a very sort of all-female project, and getting someone to play the man, the part that was not the part, it was not the show, the movie, whatever it was not about them. They were there to support the women. The story was about the women. Getting someone willing to do that was a real feat. Really it was. And this is not, and I'm something I might be doing now, finding a guy to support me that is the caliber that they want financially, meaning not the actor themselves, but the producers.
Yeah. And
finding someone willing to do something when the writing is great and the people are great, but it ain't about them, can be hard, And I think somehow there has to be a little bit of, we've been, playing supporting roles in stories about men since the dawn of time, So it'd be very interesting if there was a willingness. And I'm sure there is in some, I did finally say to my agent, let's not go after some megawatt thing. Let's find the person for whom the story speaks to enough that they'd be so happy to be here. Because I promise you that that's going to, end up with a better result. Somebody who really wants to be there to be part of telling a story, rather than, an opportunity for financial gain. I guess.
Then, for the world that you want to be in, right? It sounds to me like, to both of you, that there's a lot of distance still to go for you to feel that you're being treated as a whole human being and not just as a woman or a man, right? But as just a
Human.
complex person who's willing to use your instrument to tell stories and to be paid fairly for that.
Yeah.
I mean, so I mean, this whole thing is about like, hey, we've made a lot of progress, but I think it's pretty bracing to hear that even actors at your level of work are still questioning if there are limits.
Well,
put
for
on
me,
you.
the part of this that's interesting is the idea of what we believe as women, what we have come to believe we're worth, you know, and how long we spent sort of going, oh, I'm just so, and for me, being an actress who always wanted to be an actress from a young age, I was always so happy to be there and just couldn't believe that I got to be there, that I think I was willing to take a lot less than I should have been taking, because I was, and there were a couple of times I remember, and I can say this because the show's so long ago, but on Studio 60, when I auditioned for that, I remember I couldn't get like $1.50 for that. Like it was really hard to get paid. Now, granted, I had very few credits at that point, but I remember the feedback to me was, you should be so lucky to be part of this show.
Right.
And I thought, but what about well, you want me, right? So do I not help make the show the thing that you hope it's going to be? But it's an interesting thing, and that goes in your mind long enough as a human. I'm sure, you know, men experience this in different ways as well. But as a woman, to sort of feel like, I guess I'm just supposed to be so grateful, and I'm not supposed to step into my own power or my own acknowledgement for me to sort of go, no, you want me, you've got to pay me, you know, like you say, the instrument is it's this thing, whatever I got going on here. So it's you know, but it is a kind of collective consciousness that I think we all have kind of inhaled, whether we meant to or not. It's this sort of like internalized misogyny story that is part of our universe, part of the fabric of our daily lives. And so I know that I myself have taken many a spoonful and just thought, thank you for letting me be here, because I still have that young person in me that dreamt about doing this, and the fact that I get to means I don't want to ruin it by asking for something I think that guy's getting, you know, because I'm afraid someone's going to take it away, quite frankly, you know. And that's up to me to kind of calibrate and figure out how to stand up. Because when we all do it together, that's, I think, when it, you know, but we all are sort of battling these stories that we tell ourselves about our worth, you know, that it's not even about, you know, not loving oneself or not. It's just something that we've just, I know I have grown up with this idea of, and I've got to break that a little bit for myself. I think we all do.
Well, I think it's beautiful that you're willing to share that in this room. And this is a safe room, and people who, you know.
There's a lot of people in here with no masks on. I'm scared.
Well, we're very
feel
far
frightened.
away. Everybody here is vaccinated.
Cynthia, you're very lucky. You're somewhere else. Just kidding.
Cynthia, I want to ask you, you are about to play Elphaba in Wicked. So, and we're all very excited to see you do that. Is that moving forward? Are you prepping for that?
I think we go in June, July for rehearsal, and we start filming then. Yeah.
Okay, so you'll keep us posted on whether there's any developments there, but we're just speculating here about where there might be conversations of going on about payment, but you know, pay her, guys, just pay her, is what I would say. Well, thank you. I mean, thank you so much for coming to the Power Women Summit and being so honest. And Cynthia, thank you also for giving up your night's sleep to share these important things, because I think that, you know, for so many people in the industry, if you guys are willing to talk about these things, then that is how we make progress, and that we know other people know that they're not having these thoughts alone in their head, and you guys know that there is a community that wants to come together.
I mean, that's ultimately what we're all doing here anyway, right? Is we all want to tell stories so that we all feel a little bit less alone in the world, and that's what this is about. So the more we talk, the more we share, the more we confide in one another, the better shot I think we have at having things shift.
And what I would just say personally, as a fan of yours, is that I hope that you do take that challenging character and the not intuitive choice that other people might impose on you, and that's where your work is going to shine, and you grace us with those performances.
Thank you. That's very.
And just like a last thing for you, Sarah. Like, whenever you feel like I'm not sure if I should do this, if the deciding force is what others think, your barometer is stronger than that. So I would turn that round, reroute it, and go, am I interested in meeting this person? Have I met this person before? Because that really is the thing that I've sort of learned to rely on, because there are billions of people in the world who have their own opinions of whatever we are doing, and so should they. But if the person we get to meet is interesting enough for us to take the risk to be a vessel for them to be met, then do it. Life's too short. And the one thing you don't want to do is go away and regret it.
I love you.
I love you.
Love you.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Cynthia.
Thank you, Sarah and Cynthia. Up next, a tribute to cinematographer Halyna Hutchins, who was fatally shot last month on the set of Rust in New Mexico in an apparent accidental discharge of a prop gun. Responding to the on-set tragedy that took place, Halyna's alma mater, the American Film Institute, established a memorial scholarship in her name for female cinematographers. Last week, at an evening honoring the Power Women Summit and the Changemakers of 2021, WrapWomen welcomed AFI's Dean Susan Ruskin to the stage to say a few words about Halyna and the Scholarship Fund. Let's take a look.
Thank you to everyone at WrapWomen for supporting the Halyna Hutchins Scholarship at the American Film Institute. I'm here to express today what I believe we're all feeling about the loss of a vibrant, gifted, adventurous, collaborative team player, as well as a unique visionary that is Halyna Hutchins. Our community is rocked by this loss. It is incalculable. Yes, for AFI, it's also extremely personal. She was a member of our family, and she always will be. But we all feel this one, right? We can all see ourselves on the set that day, and we know how we wish this might have unfolded to avoid the ending that we have now no choice but to live with and to process into our new reality. Losing Halyna reminds us of all the times we had to deal with those unfamiliar locations, long hours. In my case, it was poisonous snakes and frogs and lightning in the Amazon jungle, or 250,000 stray dogs in Romania, or depending on a stunt team that we hardly knew. But we all share that can-do spirit, that feeling of invincibility on a well-run set, and we depend on one another to do our jobs safely and to mitigate risk. Halyna's death is an awful reminder of how quickly things can turn, and how we must remember, always remember, that every crew member, no matter how invincible they seem, is also vulnerable. At AFI, we think about all the films that Halyna would have made had she lived, because we know how gifted she was, and we also know how much she's going to be missed. We think about all the people she might have touched with her talent and her spirit and her kindness if she was still here with us. As you will see from her work, she was an incredible cinematographer, and she's a great friend, a mother, a wife, a daughter, and she is our sister. So let's acknowledge what those pressures of being a woman in our industry means to all of us. It's wonderful to see the support for one another in this room, because it does really matter. Halyna Hutchins will always be a member of our family, and we are determined to keep her name alive at AFI, so that every year a female cinematographer will carry on with the scholarship that bears her name, to give them the opportunity to carry on her legacy, a legacy that will not end on a set in New Mexico. It will live on, and we will continue to celebrate her and support one another. Thank you. It means a great deal to just sit in this moment and to remember that we are all a part of this community, and our hope is that you will support us to make sure that Halyna's memory continues on. There's one person I really do need to personally thank, and thank from everyone at AFI, and that's her husband, Matt. Matt, thank you for picking up the phone, making that call, and suggesting that at AFI we create this scholarship in her name and honor her. We believe it is incredibly important for us to do this, so we appreciate you call in that first place and your continued support. We have a long journey ahead on this, but I look forward to partnering with you on it. Thank you. Finally, the one thing I do want to say to you and let you know, we may have lost Halyna, but you are now a permanent member of the AFI family, and we look forward to many, many years of you being there with us, and you will always be a member of our community. Thank you.
Incredible. What an amazing way to honor Halyna. Our thoughts and prayers go out to the friends and families of Halyna. Up next, we will continue to shine a light on women behind the camera with the costume designers of House of Gucci and Dune, the production designers of Shang-Chi and King Richard, plus the producers of Belfast, The Power of the Dog, Passing, The Eyes of Tammy Faye, Respect, and Impeachment. We'll also hear from entrepreneurs turned reality television stars of My Unorthodox Life, Bling Empire, Million Dollar Listing LA, and Real Housewives of Atlanta, and some of Hollywood's top activists and changemakers, including Megan Good, Yellowstone star Piper Perabo, and trans rights activist Ashley Marie Preston, who recently organized the Netflix walkout over the Dave Chappelle special. It's going to be such a fun and empowering day. We also encourage you to check out our full panel lineup on WrapWomen.com under the tab Power Women Summit, where you'll be able to tune in on demand to all of today's sessions, from how to be a boss to activism, finding your cause. At 2 p.m. Pacific time, we'll begin today's mentorship sessions. As a reminder, if you upgraded your ticket to include mentorship, you should have already received an email with your designated date, time, and mentor assignment. This year's mentorship program is presented by Amazon Studios. It's going to be an amazing day. Enjoy.
Hello, everyone. I'm Yasmin Dunn, Director of Education and Outreach for the Hollywood Commission, and welcome to Power Women Summit, Behind the Scenes and Below the Line. Let's meet our incredibly, ridiculously talented panelists. We have with us today Jacqueline West, costume designer of Dune, Genty Yates, costume designer most recently of House of Gucci, Katie Byron, production designer, Come On, Come On, Sharon Davis, costume designer, King Richard, and Sue Chan, production designer on Shang-Chi. I am so overwhelmed to be with this amazingly talented group of ladies. So thank you for joining us here today. I have a lot of questions. So I wanted to just jump right in with one that I thought was particular to this group of women. So prior to the recent ratification of the new IATSE contract, we heard from members, particularly women, large numbers of women, about unsafe and unsanitary working conditions on set. And I'm curious about your thoughts on these revelations, and if the open conversations, do you think will have any ramifications on the work and the environment moving forward? So I'm going to go ahead and just start with Katie, if you don't mind.
Oh my gosh. I was hoping that I could just listen to everyone because, yeah, everyone on this panel is like a hero of mine. Okay, geez. I mean, I think there's a lot to say about like the change that's coming to Hollywood in our industry. And I think we're really on the verge of something really incredible and special. And I think that we're so lucky to work in an industry that like has a community that's an in-person collection of people that work together. As I talk to a lot of people nowadays, a lot of people don't have that. And the fact that we work together with each other, I think we can bond together and create change and hopefully affect other industries outside of our own. So, I mean, I just feel like our industry can really be a point of, you know, I'm really supportive, and I'm really excited about where we're headed.
Great, thank you. Sharon, do you have any thoughts on that question?
Well, I'm sure everyone here probably had to work in 2020, and it was very, finding solutions for what we took for granted in an already fast-paced industry was so eye-opening. I was just shopping alone and looking for fabric was a challenge. And I felt that even though we were aware that there was a pandemic, there were people above us that were still at business as usual, which really was stressful. I found that very stressful. And I'm hoping that that became obviously a big awareness as to why people were now unhappy with the ratification. I perhaps in the future it will be better, and we'll be able to go to the doctor when we need to and not cancel, and we will be able not to work every weekend. I mean, these are very important things for your health and also for you to do the best job possible. So, I mean, I do agree that at least you have your comrades and your unions and everyone discusses it. And basically, even without the IATSE, we can change the situation. We can just not do it. We can just start setting our own boundaries for our own personal health and our lives. That's my little thought about that.
Yeah, that's great. I think that's an excellent point in terms of what we can do collectively and what you guys can do as leaders of departments. So does anyone have anything that they are currently doing or would like to start doing on the next production in terms of just sort of setting your own boundaries, as Sharon said?
Saturdays. I'm against them.
Saturdays, yes.
Yes.
Yeah,
I really feel for my crew on a really fast-paced, hard-moving, fast-moving, challenging movie to only have one day off. And that's basically what that amounts to. You gear yourself. We all went to school and we gear ourselves to Fridays, right? And gear in our headset is having 2 days off, and it often gets us through the week, knowing you have that comfort zone on the weekends. And when you work all night Friday night and your crew has to work all Friday night, they sleep all day Saturday, they have only Sunday off. And we all know Sundays are not restful because it's already on our mind what we have to confront the next day. Friday nights are blissful, and because it means Saturday's in front of you. When you don't have that, and you've had to sleep all day Saturday and nothing, and not really have a weekend to yourself to look forward to recharge your crystal, so to speak, it's horrific for a crew. So I just think that if you want to get the most out of your crew, you have to take care of them. And I have a big problem, and I've talked to the producers on movies about it, and
it seems to be a more and more reoccurring situation.
Yes, I would agree. I think the art department costumes were often the ones that everybody assumes we're going to get it done, because so often we do. You know, we have big crews, we have a lot of prep. Somehow that seems to equate to production, that we've done all this work ahead of time and that changes don't mean a thing. Obviously, that's ridiculous. And as the heads of art departments, as the sort of necessary creatives, we really need to just draw a line in the sand and say, and if nothing else, educate them about what it's actually going to take. It's going to cost you, it's going to do this. And just because the shooting company and the actors get a full weekend doesn't mean that always means we do. You know, we always have to be ahead of everybody. And so I think there needs to be sort of a culture from the top down that really, you know, appreciates and sort of emphasizes mental health, physical health, all of those things. And it's really up to us to hammer that home from the beginning. You know, it's very common for, you know, the producers to just hammer our lead men, our decorators, our construction people, and not come to us first, because they know that the worker bees are going to feel like they need the hours, or they can persuade them, or that they're going to be more malleable. But they know that if they come to us, then we might go screaming to the director or screaming at them or something like that, and they don't want to deal with it. And then so often they work around us, and it's really important to not let that happen. You know, it's not easy. I'm not saying that like I have succeeded on every job to do that, but I feel like I need to let my team, as Jacqueline said, know that I'm supporting them. They can come to me and I will take their grievances to the producers as forcefully as I can.
Right. Yeah, that's very interesting. That sort of leads into my next question that I had, just, you know, thinking about this broader question of safety that's also been in the news and on our minds recently. What do you, like, how can we encourage our leaders to create safer workplaces? And I'm talking a broader definition of safety. So it's physical safety, psychological safety. What tools do our leaders, our producers, our first-time directors, people need to be able to create those environments for below-the-line workers? Genty, I'd love to hear from you if you have any thoughts on this.
Well, basically, I'm stuck in Europe. So I'm so proud of IATSE. I'm proud of being a member of your union, but the rules just get thrown out of the window in Europe. I've been doing 3 different jobs in Italy. They treat it like back in the 1960s. The trucks are appalling. The facilities are appalling. The green rooms on set are just a tent with a chair in them. It's just really, really appalling. And basically, I am so delighted that IATSE are doing this, because it will spread out. But we've got to change from the top. And it's a very misogynistic industry. And the more women we can get in, I worked for MGM last year. I had the best relationship with the head of physical production, a woman, and the president, a woman. I had email communication. I've never had that in 40 years from any male in any position of power. And I'm quite cross about it, actually. But, you know, where our arms are chopped off at the armpits, we don't really have a leg to stand on. So I'm so delighted that we're moving forward. It's terrific. It's exciting. And I can't wait.
Great, thank you. Does anyone else have any other thoughts on that? Any tools that I'm always interested to hear from below the line, and I have to say that I really struggle with that term. I don't like it at all. So I'm interested to hear what the workers and people in your position, basic crafts, and everybody who does all the things. What do you wish that our producers and our leaders and our financiers and our studios were doing to ensure safety?
Well, I think one of the things that we can do directly is that we can educate directors who are coming up. You know, the directors who are coming up, who are, you know, young and cutting their teeth on their first films, you know, we have their ears from the beginning, and we can say to them, look, this is what we go through, not just to talk about the creative part of it, but this is what my crew has to go through to deliver this thing that I am pitching to you, whether it's the costume or the sets, and sort of make them understand so that when they're conversing with the producers, it's in their ear and they say, well, I understand that this is what has to happen. And, how can you reconcile this thing that you're asking them to do with this thing that I've asked them to do?
Mhm.
And I think that that's part of it, and really not just the directors, but the young producers. And there are plenty of older, more seasoned producers and directors who are also very responsible, very interested in safety. I think every movie has its culture. I've definitely been on movies where they're, 10-hour days. I'm not going to put people through that. And I've been on other movies where they just don't care. It's just the bottom line, get it done. And so, hopefully those folks will be drummed out of the industry when better people replace them. But I think, again, we need to just we have the experience, we need to tell them, this is what it takes.
Right.
Even if that's not your job, you should know this is what it takes.
I think it would take a very long time to filter down though.
Mm.
I think more women at the top is just as essential. It's essential. Why aren't there more women at the top?
I absolutely agree. When you have a woman producer, or I've done a couple movies with Mary Parent, who's the head of Legendary. She listens to everything you say and does something about it. I have to say she's a hero of mine. And again, it's a woman who is, much more, I agree with Janty, much more in tune with taking care of a crew.
Exactly.
Sympathetic, listens, and acts on it.
Right. I mean, and conversely, we can, make sure that we are valuing those skills and in men. I think that that's also part of what happens is that what we value for them and their business skill set is not actually what we need to be a good leader in terms of empathy and listening and everything that you just spoke to. So I just want to shift gears a teeny bit, but something else that we heard a lot about as this information was in the public sphere is a lack of diversity in your jobs, in your crafts, and in a lot of IATSE. So what is your take on building the pipeline? What do you feel like is your responsibility at this point in your careers to build a diverse and inclusive pipeline?
I personally, we struggle for anybody. There is so much work in England and Europe. It is ridiculous. And unfortunately, nothing to do with diversity, but there are people who might start as a runner and then suddenly they're an assistant designer because basically there aren't the people in Europe, there aren't the skilled people. And that drives me crazy. We don't have we do obviously have a diversity problem, but my whole thing is women, more women all the time in every single walk of film life, basically. However, we can't even get the staff, we can't get the runners, we can't even get assistants, etc. So we're just having to go from, we've seen, haven't we, when armourers supply their daughters, etc.
I agree with Janty that what we have to do, we just have to hire more women. We have to hire more minorities. I think that in different parts of the world, in different parts of the country, you're going to get a different pool of candidates. I'm in Atlanta now, and I was thrilled that I was able to populate my entire art department with minorities, and women. African-American crew are coming up in Atlanta, and it's terrific. In LA, not so much. In Australia, I was able to hire lots of Asians, which is terrific. And Marvel, I don't know if they're doing this going forward, but certainly on our film, they had paid positions earmarked just for minority folks who were like entry level. Every department got 2 people who should be, in our case, Asians, who were going to learn their craft alongside with more seasoned professionals. And that is something every studio should do, in my opinion. For every department, there should be a paid position and you can hire a minority, you can hire a woman, you can hire a woman or minority, you know, it shouldn't be so hard. And so I think it has gotten better. You know, my 20 odd years doing this, there were no minorities when I started out and very few women. And now there's a lot more women in the art department. There are definitely but you know, it varies by whether they're in construction or paint or set designers or illustrators or art directors. You know, it's and you know, I think sometimes you have to sacrifice experience, but you know, we all have to like pitch in and maybe do more, or you have a really experienced person with an inexperienced one just so you can get them into the department so they get a good credit and they can take on the next project. And you know, I think that's just something that we all have to do.
Sharon, did you have something?
You have to avoid opportunists. That's the only thing I would say.
That's a good point. Sharon?
Oh, yes. Well, you know, being a minority myself, I hear what everyone's saying. And I have in the last 15 to 20 years hired a few young women and just kind of raised them. And now they're their own designers. I just, you know, I don't wait for the studio to help me. I just jumped in and honed these ladies and took them under my wing. And I do it. I try to do it on every show. Any, you know, even if it's a man, I mean, if he's willing to, you know, work as a PA or, you know, work his way up and learn, and I'm willing to hire him and help him achieve that goal. So it's really important that they have a mentor of sorts to guide them through the politics. And also because it's so brutal and the way people talk to you, and you've got to know the difference of when it is against you, when it's racially inspired or when it's just film, And I was saying 98% is just film. The crassness, the rudeness, and you have to acquire a tough shell to deal with that kind of abuse.
It's one industry where it's still allowed, you know.
Exactly.
Yes. I mean,
no one wants to speak up because they think they'll never work again.
Right.
I mean, I used to have a clothing company, and you know, you can ever raise your voice or you know, talk disrespectfully to someone, you will be so you know, gone after. You'll have lawyers at your front door. Not that I did, but I have friends that own huge companies, clothing companies in the Bay Area, and it's just not accepted. And somehow in the film business, the, you know, megalomaniacal thing is absolutely not addressed.
Interesting.
Exactly.
I mean, there's so many, I've said no to so many films just because a director has a certain reputation. And I want to put myself in a position where life's too short to work with people who aren't nice to other people. Right. I mean, I've had people on my crew go after other people more subordinate in position, and I've fired them. I said, I don't yell at anyone. Nobody on my crew gets to yell at anyone else. And you have to start somewhere, and that's where I started. Right. I'm not going to allow anybody to go after anyone. There's no reason you can't get something done by being nice.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
That's great. No, I think that's a wonderful way to approach it, and make sure that you are, to Sharon's point, doing what you can in your little corner of this big system rather than waiting.
It has to start somewhere. You know, we have to, you know, make an example in our own departments and at least be protective of the people that work for us.
No, and then as Sharon said too, I think, you know, having that, it's in my mind, it goes a little bit beyond mentorship, but it's also this idea of sponsorship where you are publicly vouching for someone else and saying, I'm happy to recommend this person. I'm putting my name on the line. And I think that does a lot to diversify our up and coming people and who's getting hired if you are vouching for them. So I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about some creative stuff, because as I said, you are all so brilliant, and I'm a little intimidated to be here with you. Katie, I wanted to hear from you. I read something interesting about your creative process, and I'm curious about what you think makes a really great relationship. Like how, because we talk a lot about representation in the room, but how do you ensure that your voice and your creativity shows up in the final product? And how do you manage that relationship with a director or the rest of your team?
Oh man, well, I feel like I've been really grateful and lucky to have been working with really wonderful collaborators the past 5 years or so. I mean, I think I've had a history of working with good collaborators, but like something recently, I don't know, it's like when you work with someone that trusts you, when you work with someone that respects you, you end up like wanting to give them the world out of love. And then that it sort of becomes like a love language, this idea of like wanting to sort of deliver out of love and respect. And then kind of also working that same way with your crew, like really realizing that like if we all do something out of love for each other and out of like compassion and kindness, then all of a sudden the project becomes like a bit more like exciting and playful and fun. So that relationship, I think it works above, towards the director. It also works for my crew. And I think that like it creates this collaborative process all over the place. And I think that, the first person that really kind of taught me that was Olivia Wilde, working with her, just because the level of trust she had in us was just immense. And so we could pass that on. And so when we're talking about change in Hollywood and how it needs to come from the top, I really felt that. I really felt like getting that respect from the director and getting to hand that back to the crew. Everybody like wanted the job to last forever. And everybody was really content and happy and proud of what we made. And honestly, it was one of those things when we made Booksmart, we're like, well, maybe it was too special of a process. And we were happy with the results. So it kind of broke the mold. And I think that's been the system I've employed ever since. It's just compassion, kindness, and I meditate with my crew sometimes. We get weird, we have fun, we just get as playful as possible to pull off something that is our industry, and filmmaking is doing impossible things all the time. So that's the process.
Great, thank you for that. Does anyone else have any thoughts on this idea of making sure that your voice and your creative vision shows up in the final product?
Well, part of it is, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just going to say, usually for me, it's all about the director. You put your hands and your creativity in their hands. And if you have somebody really fabulous that is, out there watching over the big picture, then it seems to go, things seem to fall into place. And if a really creative director with a vision hires you, they usually have seen something in your past work or in your interview that allows them to put trust in you and just let you do your thing. And that's the optimum situation. And I think the creativity part really filters down from the director.
Yeah.
For me,
yeah.
Who I throw in with is the important part.
Yeah, I would 100% agree with Jacqueline about that. Directors who you have a rapport with right off the bat are just a delight to work with. And you may not agree on everything right off the bat. You may disagree about some things all the way down the line, but at least you're dialoguing about it, and you're having a constructive, goal-oriented way to solve a particular problem. I sort of feel like the balance, it's a combination of checking your ego at the door, but also persisting in what your ideas are. And then as each collaborator comes on, it's fun, you know, to work with the director and then the cinematographer and the costume designer and visual effects. And, you know, it's fun to everybody brings something different to the table. And each person has, I mean, not so much an agenda, but a different point of view about where you're all headed. And being able to both listen and communicate to get all the ideas out there is super important. And so I love that part of it, especially in prep, but I also enjoy conveying all of that to my team. And there's nothing that I discuss with the director or the cinematographer or the costume designer that I don't then immediately spill onto my team, because they all have things to contribute when they're going to add things to all the ideas that are swirling around up here. And they're going to even, you know, they're going to create this great foundation for them so that hopefully by the time we're actually shooting it, it all feels extremely cohesive. So that's in the ideal situation. Not every movie is ideal, of course, but you know, you know, if you kind of start and you have enough time and everybody's talking to each other, maybe you get there.
Yeah, I so agree with you, Sue. It's like the perfect ready room when you and the director and the production designer, and I find the first department head start, and that just creates this whole a little more depth than what I could bring, you know, so I have a little more backstory. And then I love to actually get the input of the actor. And then I like to then circle back to the director and the production designer, and kind of, it's like making a cake, you know, I just keep folding in ingredients and then I start baking.
Yeah, I call it ping pong.
Batting back and forth. Yeah.
You want a happy actor, you want a happy director. It's a collaborative thing. But I've worked for Ridley for so long, I can't really talk about other directors, but I've just got a great team at the moment, and I just wish we were given more time. And again, I think it's a male thing, and we as costume designers and production designers, we're expected to do it. We're just expected to do it. You can do it in that time. They give us 2 months prep. No, I can't, but you do. You know, you do it struggling, doing 7-day weeks. You do it, you just do it because we're trained to do it. But there is a big ask, I know, but they should really budget more time for us. And then you don't have your fratter days.
Right. Janty, I just have to ask you one thing. I've worked with a lot of directors more than once, but you've worked with Ridley for so long. Does he just leave you to it? It's just a personal question.
Does he sleep? Did you say?
Does he just leave you to it? Does he just?
Oh, no. No, he's incredibly collaborative. He's very costume.
So he likes costumes.
He loves costume. Yeah, I'm so lucky. And now we have a certain shorthand, and that's great as well. But he's very proactive. And God, if he left me to it, would never make a movie probably. So I need him to kick me up the arse.
That's fantastic. So we've talked a lot about the creative process and a collaboration in a team that does work. What do we do when it doesn't work? I feel like this is a question that at the Hollywood Commission we try to provide answers and training and resources for people. What do you do when you're navigating a difficult conversation, especially about something as personal as representation, particularly if it's your own culture that you are having to justify? How have you learned to navigate these difficult conversations about authentic representation, since that is such a huge part of all of your jobs?
Authentic representation about fighting for a certain look that you feel is.
Yeah, I mean, what happens when there's a crossroads, if there's an impasse, if you're saying this is actually the way this should be represented, and you're getting pushback, and I think that's, especially right now, I know that there are a lot of people who are dying for that accuracy and need to see the authentic representation on screen. And how do you push for it? How do you navigate that conversation?
Well, I feel we're a creative team, and we're actually hired to design, or we're hired to make a film. So there is got to be a little bit of creative originality,
right,
to like even a biopic like I did. I mean, there are scenes that I did match perfectly to real photographs that they did, but in the quiet moments in their house, it's important to convey the story or the feeling to the audience. And so I would not put what they probably had on. I want to put how they feel, or how I need the audience to understand the storyline. And I will argue that, and had to argue that because they don't know the whole story. So we're telling a story. So sometimes the clothes are the catalyst to something that, if we put what they really were, would not really make sense.
Yeah, I don't think that you can always if you only did strict realism, then it wouldn't be heightened in the way that everybody goes to cinema for.
Not a film.
Exactly. There's a degree to which, you have to go further. And I think that you're never going to satisfy everybody. Culture is such a big umbrella. It encompasses so much. And I think you just have to make the decisions together with your collaborators. And certainly, I've gotten pushback from, people who I consider to be outside of the creative process, to say, are you sure you can do that? Is somebody going to get upset? Is that authentic? And sometimes the answer is, yes, it's authentic, but somebody might get upset. So, which you choose your poison, and then it's the further conversation. And I could argue and argue and argue, and then I might still lose it ultimately depends on the director. I'm there to work for the director, and if they've deliberated about all of my arguments and they still choose to do what the outsider thought, there's nothing I can do about that.
Are you talking about an outsider, i.e. a producer?
A producer, a lawyer,
producer,
yeah, clearance,
someone like that, yeah, or maybe none of the above. It's happened many ways. So,
Interesting. That's great.
I'm so frustrated if that happened. I would get so angry. I'd get so mad.
Yeah, well, we all have a high pain threshold.
It does actually happen. If I was to think back and analyze it, it does happen. But I think I'm fortunate in that respect, because I just work for Ridley Scott. So it's always the last, the last film's always the last film, never assume, never assume.
I think the strong director is the key. And if you really do your homework and have good reasons behind your choices, like Sharon just said, telling the story and being able to sell that this particular choice you've made, furthers the story, and you have a good, strong director, they are going to stand behind you and you're going to get away with it. It's all about a director with a really strong vision and some incredible films behind him, like Ridley, he's you up. The producers are not going to say boo to Ridley.
Well, you just mentioned it in a sentence. Well, Ridley said,
yes.
Door open.
Yes, absolutely. And I believe there's so much to be said for as you expand your career, that picking your director is more important sometimes than picking the project. For me.
And I also think even young directors,
when I feel I'm in good hands, I can be much more creative. I know I'm going to be backed up by the director I'm working with.
Right. And Sue, what were you saying?
I was going to say that I think also even sometimes young directors, if they're getting a shot, They feel like, oh, they have to pick their battles. But I think what they don't realize is they have a lot of power. I mean, they're directing the movie. And what they need to learn is that they can really, be firm and push their ideas. And I think some of them are better than that than others. And some are just so creatively strong, even if they're young, that they can just say to the producers or whoever, no, this is what I'm going to do. And here's why. And that's it.
Right.
End of story. This is what I'm going to do. And I agree that I think those directors, young, experienced, older, whatever, those are the best to work with because they're just single-minded. Here's my story. Here's how I want to tell it. I disagree with you. Let's move on. And I think that's just the best.
Right. That's excellent. So while we're talking about new directors, first-time directors, I want to leave this panel just drawing on this wealth of experience. What advice do you have for people who are entry-level workers who are coming in, starting now, post-pandemic, post-ratification and almost strike? What can we tell new workers who are coming in to get how to navigate everything that's happening?
I'd just tell them never to say no.
Okay. Anybody else?
I feel that the younger generation as a whole is a little bit wiser than us about taking care of themselves and not really standing strong about having their weekends and their time off.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm going to say for the last 10 years, people have been complaining that these young people, they don't want to stay, they don't want to work late, but they're truly taking care of themselves. They are, work is over. This is a job and I am leaving.
Mm-hmm.
So I tell them to respect that, respect how you feel about that. But while you're at work, do 100%.
Right.
Do your best and keep a great attitude. And don't, and like Janti said, the no thing, don't ever say no. Just work around that. I never say no. I'll say, I'll see what I can do. Let me get back to you. There's a million answers, but no is never the answer on a film set. So I think that the younger generation is going to be the change of the industry, personally.
Mm-hmm.
I think they're going to set it. And it's really not even a change, is it, Janti? Because when we started out, it was slower. Production was somewhat slower due to the fact that we did not have communication devices as a cell phone. We didn't have a computer, so we had to work off, production sheets that were handwritten, and it was fabulous.
Landlines and phone boxes and
pagers.
Right.
Phone booth.
But everything had to be so well prepared each day.
Mm-hmm.
And the director really had to know. Everyone had to really know their job for us to get through it.
I've worked with Terrence Malick a lot, and there was a call sheet once, and it was a big scene, a white call sheet. And the next day I came in and it was a blue call sheet, and it was one scene on the call sheet, and it said to be shot only if the magic presents itself.
Oh my gosh.
And I thought the producers must be going crazy. That's why he uses all private money. No one can say.
Oh, I love it, Jackie. You should have framed that.
Yeah.
That's true.
The Malick movie is like so calm and old-fashioned, and you have time to think and create, and it's so respectful of every single person. I've never heard him raise his voice at anyone. But imagine a call sheet with a scene to be shot only if the magic presents itself.
I love that. I feel like I'm going to say that to Anita all the time now. I'm only going to work if the magic presents itself. Anybody else have any thoughts on what we say to entry-level people coming in?
I always tell them to ask lots of questions. I think that there is so much that you don't know. There's so much that I don't know. I think that, a day should not go by in which you don't ask a question of somebody or everybody in the art department. And then, trust your instincts as you develop, work with good people, don't work with bad people.
I agree.
Hard to decipher at the beginning, though.
Yes.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. And
That's why you ask the questions.
Right. And every film with a different director and a different crew is completely different than the next. So if you've done, 4 films and you think you know it all, you can't go in with that attitude. You've got to know that you have to come in. It's a clean slate, and it's a new canvas to paint. It's always entirely different. So always just be aware and listen and learn. And don't think that you know it all because you've done a few films.
Yeah.
every film is different. Every film is a new world.
Mhm. Katie, do you have any thoughts?
Oh man, I'm just listening to everyone. I mean, I one thing I keep thinking about is how everyone on this panel is so confident. And it took, I mean, I feel like I'm working on it. I'm still, it's funny because I feel like if all these questions, I often ask myself like, but is that the right answer? I constantly question myself. And yeah, I feel like it's really beautiful to get to sit with you guys and hear these stories and to like just to see you all so firm, and I'm humbled, that's all. So
Well, you shouldn't be, because
It's great. They don't always listen to us, but
I tell everybody who works with me to, watch every old movie they can by all great directors and read as many books as they can. And I don't think anyone listens to me, especially about the reading. Reading gives you a certain confidence. There's certain writers that you can't read and not get some, learn something from. And when you learn something, it gives you more confidence. Each thing you learn, D.H. Lawrence taught me so much. I just feel every writer that I've read has taught me something. If you read, some good writers, and I try to give people a lot of my younger crew members will come to me and ask a film list or a reading list. I don't know if they really, pursue it afterwards, but it is confidence giving, especially to young people coming up. You can't learn everything in school.
Right.
I felt my education started after I graduated from university. I started reading everything I couldn't read because of my curriculum at school.
Mm-hmm.
And I was voracious, but I was living in a town, Berkeley, where there were more books per capita in Berkeley than any other city in the world. And it was all bookstores, and everybody wanted to outdo everybody in what they read. And so people were so confident because they read so much. And when you approach actors and directors, if you have done your homework and have reasons for your choices, they tend to listen.
That's great advice. I will gladly take you up on your recommended reading list as well. Well, I think that's about it for us, unless anyone has any final thoughts, things that they want to add.
I just want to say it's just great to see the people I know and meet some new people in the industry.
And Jackie, I don't have your phone number. It's driving me crazy.
Right.
You have mine, I think.
Yeah. I'll text it or write it to you.
I have your email only.
Yeah. I think this panel is
Jackie and I have offices next door to each other, and we haven't even been there.
Yeah. I haven't been there, Sharon, for 22 months.
A while.
I know, bless you.
Webs going across my office.
I want to compliment whoever put this panel together, because I just think the range of all of our experiences and the different things we've done is just delightful. I think that just to comment on what you said, Katie, I think your approach is every bit as, valid as being, a confident, been around the block, whatever person we are, because I think being humble and generous is equally as important as being, full of vigor and vinegar. I think that I think that's just as good, and it's just great to see the range.
Yes, I love that you meditate. I love all that. I think
fantastic.
You inspire your crew to do their best, and you inspire them to have a reason to come. So that's fantastic.
That's right.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for watching this, and enjoy the rest of the Power Women Summit.
Okay, well, here we go. I'm Stephanie Elaine. I'm the founder of Homegrown Pictures. Welcome everybody to the Power Women Summit. And this is the Producers Roundtable called Inspiring Change Through Storytelling. We have an amazing array of such inspiring women producers. So I'm just going to give you a quick intro to who these ladies are. Their credits are so extensive that I'm just going to highlight a couple things just to give people perspective. So let's start with Tanya Sagachian, amazing producer. We're talking today about The Power of the Dog, Jane Campion's new film, but she's also behind The Crown, Harry Potter series, Bright Star. There's just too many to name. So welcome, Tanya. Happy to have you. My dear friend, Nina Jacobson, who I've known longer than I'd like to call out, because it would embarrass us both. You know her from The Hunger Games, Crazy Rich Asians, The People versus O.J. Simpson, and we're here today to talk about impeachment. And there's Nina Yang Bon Jovi, who I've also known forever. We're talking about passing today, which is going to be fun. She's also behind Fruitvale Station, Dope, Sorry to Bother You, a lot of things with her partner, Forrest Whitaker. Nina, I'm glad to have you here. We have Laura Berwick, whose film Belfast is incredible and very, very beautiful. She's also an amazing manager and producer. And lastly, we got two more. This is a big panel. We have Stacey Scher, another, like if you're in this business long enough, you get to work with all these people and you get to know them well. So Stacey Scher, welcome. Stacey, we're talking about respect, Aretha Franklin's Respect, but Erin Brockovich, Pulp Fiction, Out of Sight, the Oscars, just the list goes on and on. Happy to have you. And finally, Rachel Shane. Hey, Rachel. Rachel has produced The Eyes of Tammy Faye, Hell or High Water, the other Aretha, Motherless, Brooklyn, and many more. So thank you, ladies, all for being here, for taking the time out. For me, I think when I start to take on a project, I have to ask myself one question, and that question is why? What's the reason? What is motivating me to do the heavy lifting, many hours, many years to get something made? So that's something I just want to really ask everybody to sort of speak to the reason why. And let's start with Laura.
Perfect. Thank you. Great question. Well, Belfast was actually a very personal project for Ken. He wrote a beautiful script about uncertainty, coming together of a community in a time of uncertainty, which obviously, but using joy and laughter and the occasional song to sort of illustrate that. And I think that as a person who I migrated from my own country and came to America in my 20s, it sort of had a particular resonance for me, the story. And so that was very powerful for me. And, not only was I passionate about the script, but I was then, felt like it was my job to protect and enable Ken's vision, which was, I thought, exceptional. So that's a little bit of how my personal story sort of wove into the themes of Ken's story.
Awesome. Great. Who else wants to jump in? Stacy, talk to us about respect.
This was kind of unusual. It's the first time in my career I've ever been kind of brought in on a movie that was already in process. And who isn't an Aretha Franklin fan, but Tracy Scott Wilson's script was so compelling and extraordinary. And I really wanted to support Liesl Tommy and both of their voices telling this very unusual way of looking at the Queen of Soul, and ironically, the person with the greatest voice in the history of music had to find her voice to become the icon that we all knew. And so when I was asked if I would come in, I jumped at the opportunity because it was like scratching off a winning lottery ticket to read a script like that and work with the team that had already been put together by Liesl.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Yeah, that's interesting that you came in.
It's never happened to me before in my career, so.
Yeah, well, it's a good one for it to happen on, right?
Yeah.
That's awesome. Tanya, tell us about the power of the dog. You've been working with Jane before, so tell us.
I had worked with Jane before when I invested in her film Bright Star, which she made 12 years ago. But, when Jane Campion comes to you and says she wants to make a film, I think all of the women on this conversation roundtable would say, well, absolutely, she's the trailblazer. I mean, she's the woman who's been leading the way for filmmakers and women filmmakers for 30 years. And for me, it was a dream come true. Jane and I had made Bright Star, or worked together on Bright Star, and then she'd gone into television. So it was really important for me to try and encourage her back into the film business. And when she found this book, The Power of the Dog, which was written in the 60s by a man called Thomas Savage, and gave it to me, I read it, was overwhelmed by how contemporary and relevant the book was, even though it really deals with big male themes. That was part of the excitement, because he was an opportunity to take a filmmaker like Jane and get her to embrace very, very contemporary feels about prejudice and who you are and how to live the way you need to live, but through a different lens. So it was an absolute dream come true for me.
Awesome. Lena, why don't you talk to us? Talk to us about impeachment.
Well, my producing partner, Brad Simpson, and I were drawn to impeachment because we were really fascinated by the women at the margins of power who were at the center of this story and yet completely unable to sort of craft or control their own narratives. Their narratives were written for them in unbelievably misogynistic terms. And we were all fine with it. I think culturally, in a way that looking back 20 years later, we wanted to come back to those characters, come back to that story and find their voices. In the case of Monica, give her a voice in the telling of her own story for the first time. Especially because she had been really muzzled, she was forbidden from speaking by Ken Starr, and given her legal troubles, was forbidden from really ever being able to speak up during the time that all of these events transpired. And that was what drew us to the story, which most people probably would have approached in terms of these powerful men at war with each other. But what we were interested in were these women who say lived in the margins of power and were so limited in what they could hope to say, do, or achieve at that time, and to see the story through their eyes.
And was there a gag order in place, and that was lifted?
Yes.
Was it about the passage of time that allowed her to finally have her say?
Well, at the time that the investigation was going on, that the grand jury was convening, all of, when it was all happening, once, the independent counsel became involved and had her in their crosshairs, yes, she was forbidden from speaking at that time. Once it was over, whatever, nobody really wanted to hear what she had to say at that point, and it really was a good 20 years before she started to reclaim her narrative. She had been, really was one of the first victims of like internet public shaming. But as much as she was sort of died by the sword of the internet at that time, she also was kind of reborn as she started to take control of her narrative, become a voice in anti-bullying, and find a lot of young women who could really see her as the sort of strong and, incredibly brave person that she is.
Okay, we're going to get back into that. Rachel, talk to us about the eyes of Tammy Faye.
Yeah, it's interesting, Nina, because Tammy Faye's story is somewhat similar in that she was also defined by the men around her, her husband and his crimes, the white evangelical authority at the time. And she was one of the few women who really had a pulpit. And at the same time, she stood up for LGBTQ rights when no one else would, and had an AIDS patient on her show which was unheard of in that community. Jessica Chastain, who's a longtime collaborator and friend of mine, sent me the doc that this was based on. And I was just really struck by Tammy Faye, the human being, and how she really had this loving heart and was very open-hearted, and what she did to get a seat at the table. And it was just an incredible story. So because of that, I really wanted to come on board, and we'd been in development for many years on it, and very happy that it's out in the world now.
Awesome. And last but not least, Nina, talk to us about passing.
So
why? What's the why for you on passing?
Why I'm always looking for a story that fulfills a certain void in the business or in the current climate, and knowing that Nella Larson published her novel in 1929, which is 90 plus years ago, and this film has never been made, but still remains very relevant, and it's often talked about. It's often read during in academic curriculums, that it was the right thing to, not the right thing, but it's like an exciting project to pursue. Getting to know Rebecca Hall and her heritage and her backstory, why she was drawn to it, why she wrote it, and also created an entire storyboards by hand, in her notebook of the entire movie. Just, I was so impressed by her vision, and many times, as you know, Stephanie, is that Forrest and I like to champion first-time feature directors, and she's a first-time feature director that had a really specific, singular vision, and we really wanted this film to create a lot of dialogue, and it's doing that, so that makes us very happy, and that's why we took it on.
Amazing. When I was watching everybody's movies and your show, Nina, I realized these are all period pieces, which not only are harder to get made, I'd say. But for me, again, when I think about a period piece, I want to know why now. Like, what is it? What's it reflecting on in contemporary society? And I'm sure many people who are going to be watching this haven't seen your movies yet, but can you speak to that a little bit? Because it adds, of course, an extra layer of money, a wardrobe. Like, there's so much that you pack into a period piece, but yet they're all really, really contemporary. So I just wanted you to speak to the contemporary nature of these movies. You were just talking about, like, 90 years ago, Larson published this book, and race relations are just out of control right now. But can anybody, and you guys can just jump in now, because I want this to be just a real conversation. Like what is it about your particular period piece that you feel is really relevant for today?
If I jump in there, our story is set in Montana in the 1920s. It's ostensibly a picture of the American West, but Jane's vision of it is a very unfamiliar picture of the American West. It's a psychological drama. It really looks at the nature of the relationships between the four central characters and how society has forced them to be perceived in a way that may not be the way that they should be perceived or the way they can actually be their true selves. So it's very contemporary in terms of its preoccupations with masculinity, with the way in which you have to overcome any prejudice that you face, and the way in which both men at the time and women at the time were constricted by the worlds they lived in and the opportunities that were made available for them. So although on the one hand we have Benedict Cumberbatch playing a really complex, rich cowboy who has many, many layers that are revealed as the film unfolds, we also see Kirsten Dunst play a very classical role of a woman who unfortunately is driven by the kind of position she finds herself into, losing her independence, not being able to have the voice that today we would never allow to happen. But at the time, it was absolutely the fate of so many women. And it's a film where the other characters in tandem with the owner of the ranch, the Benedict Cumberbatch character, are all caught in a dance of human behavior that they were put in by the society that they lived in. So I think we can all relate to those issues today, and having Jane's lens, a modern lens, and a kind of interest in depicting the landscape, the costume, and the kind of character of the music that we have in the score that Johnny Greenwood gives us makes it feel incredibly modern, but gives us a window on the past.
Yeah, some of those shots were incredible. I mean, just a real, and where was that shot?
Well, the film was shot in New Zealand, but it is 1920s Montana.
Yeah. Beautiful.
And I think that, just as this is about women, was a real tribute to Ari Wegner, our DP, extraordinary woman behind the camera who is a master of light and of storytelling. And, it's a real pleasure for both Jane and I to be able to put together a crew on this film and give opportunities to people like Ari to express her voice in an environment that you wouldn't necessarily have normally imagined someone like her would have taken on.
And the ode to John Ford, to the Westerns of old, with the framing of the house, of the characters within the frame, was beautiful. It's really beautiful.
We also have found, having, done our big deep dive into the 80s and American Crime Story, that for these, it takes about 20 years, I think, at least, to get any real perspective on these events that, in these nonfiction stories that at the time provoke such heated emotion. And that when you're in the thick of that emotion, everybody can really only see it through their own lens. And that the exercise of trying to have compassion for all of our characters and to have empathy for all of our characters, even when they do make terrible mistakes or do horrible things, that it takes time, and that time and distance and a historical lens. For us to have made impeachment post Me Too, it's a completely different prism through which to see this story than had we tried to tell it 10 years ago. And when we were doing impeachment and people would say, like, which one? We were like, thinking that it might be a contemporary story, and why don't you do that? And I was like, I wouldn't touch that one with a 10-foot pole, because it's still too hot and we're all still so upset in different ways, no matter which side of it you're on. And I think part of it is having to get past the intensity of living it into a perspective of being able to look back at it and understand how it fits in and how it fits into the moment. And for us, certainly, we felt that, this story is in many respects an origin story for today in terms of the political discourse, the degree of partisanship and of taking your side so fiercely, sort of, and regardless of the complexities, and only being able to see it through your own side. And that, it fit very organically to what we've been living. But say in the heat of the moment, I don't think you can see those references as much as you can when you look back.
I agree with that. I mean, I think that the historical context that you need to have only comes with the lens of time. I mean, certainly when we were making Mrs. America, every day redistricting was something that Phyllis was dealing with in basically 1974. And really, like, Reagan in 80 is the beginning of everything that you guys covered in impeachment. And look, when you look at what Aretha faced when she was supporting Angela Davis, when she was, a crucial, most people didn't know her family's deep ties to the civil rights movement. And you look, we're right there right now. I mean, we're literally reliving all of these movements that started in the 60s, and the kind of degeneration of them started in the 80s and 90s,
Totally.
Sadly, we're right back there.
It's so sad. And I was thinking what you were saying, Nina, that in 20 years, looking back at our time now, will we be able to see the perspective of all sides? I think not.
Yeah.
I'm like so in it. I can't imagine there's another side. It's really interesting.
I'd love to share a little bit about passing in period. I feel like Forrest and I probably chose one of the toughest films to champion this round for the fact that it's a black and white film shot in, the setting is 1929, with starring 2 women of color. And we chose to shoot it in a 4:3 ratio. So inherent biases are all against us. And because being in the BIPOC multicultural realm, we're always challenged, whether they're like, oh, in 1960s, oh, not Godfather Harlem, it's going to be a tough one because it's going to be more expensive, right? And then, oh, wait, you're going back all the way to 1920s. Why are you guys doing that to yourself? That's what we get. But we feel that, if our counterparts can do it, why not us? And it's a different type of challenge we face, but it's worth the fight because, to be able to showcase the beauty of that time period of Harlem, of these women and these stories, that's what's worth the fight. So when Stephanie, when you mentioned period piece, it actually it gives me a bit of a panic attack, given the fact that these inherent biases are against it, especially for the BIPOC realm.
But Nick, I think it's really interesting you say that, because our story, for example, was written in 1967. And when it was written, one of the core themes of it, to do with sexuality, was something that it wouldn't have been possible to admit or speak about. So actually, the distance, it's a period story, but we've been really true to the preoccupations of the writer at the time and of the period that he wrote about, which was many decades before that. But we're only able to really do that now and embrace it in its full context because of how far we've advanced into the contemporary. And it's very exciting to be able to do that and to see that there is a growth forward and a movement forward. So.
With Tammy Faye, she and Jim were the first reality TV stars, essentially. So I don't think they even recognized the power of that and the whole reality versus, I guess, facade that we're now experiencing right now with Instagram and Facebook and TikTok. So that's a really interesting line to draw from, I guess it was the 80s until now. And yeah, I guess it's similar to both what Stacey and Nina is saying. It's a similar time period.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And when I saw Belfast, I was like, oh my goodness, I just saw that on TV.
Yeah.
It's very contemporary. I mean, the idea that in one block, so many different people have lived in peace, and then something triggers this virulent hate amongst people who are neighbors.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think also the other factor that, sort of ties it in with, contemporary times, that, the story came to Ken, I think, when, it was obviously with the beginning of lockdown, everything went very quiet, and he was really aware that, he suddenly could hear, no planes ahead. He sort of, the story sort of came to him. I think it'd been with him for his whole life, but it sort of came to him in this more sort of a kind of acute and powerful way. And he sort of wrote it. And I think because the themes, obviously resonate with what we've all experienced in this really sort of uncertain period of lockdown, and I think it's sort of, he was able to sort of recall, his own family's resilience, and in particular, I think he's done a beautiful job of drawing, so the female characters, I think both his mother, the Ma character, and the granny character is sort of like the unrecognized, like women often are, the unrecognized backbone of the family. They sort of, they keep the family together, and they made an enormous sacrifice in his case, because they had to leave. Because of this violence and because of the disruption, the family had to make a decision to leave Northern Ireland when, in the late 60s, when the Troubles began. So I think, as I say, he's done a beautiful job of drawing very sympathetically and in a way that's very identifiable. I think that's why it's resonating with so many people. This beautiful portrait of a family in an uncertain time, dealing with change, which I think is, obviously what we've all just experienced in this lockdown. So I think that sort of very powerfully resonates for audience, and certainly, my experience of working through it. It was very sort of very powerful experience.
And I thought it was really interesting that the movie starts in color, and the body of the movie is in black and white.
Yeah.
And then it just to suggest memory,
Yeah.
to suggest it is contemporary, but it's in the past. It's very well done. I thought it was really well done.
Yeah, I think Ken said you often, I think your memories are in black and white. So, but yeah, thank you. I think he did a very, very beautiful job, authentic to the time, obviously.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
What is your personal feeling about using your work to inspire change? Is that something you're aware of, that you think about? Are you drawn to things for the entertainment value, or is it something that you think about when you're working?
I mean, I'll jump in. I absolutely do. I absolutely do. I mean, it was definitely why we made Erin Brockovich, 100%. I think it's a lot of times it's the power of one person to also make a difference, that nothing's too small. But I also think that you can influence people in genre. I mean, look, when we came away from Mrs. America, we had endless debates about the fact that we wanted to inspire people to vote, and that it was really important to get out there and vote. So yeah, I think you can certainly influence people in a really subliminal and way in genre, and influence the way people think, but I definitely am always keeping that in mind. We have a very powerful message.
Yeah, that's top and center for me always in assessing material, and what I'm really drawn to. One of the movies that is coming out that Madison Walls has been involved with, actually this Friday, called India Sweets and Spices, and it's all South Asian cast, first time South Asian female writer-director, and it is all about that perspective. And it just allows you to get into a world that you just don't have access to. And I think the more that we can empathize and relate to other cultures and other people in our society, it's just going to help us so much. And I think that the creative visual space is one of the few places that it can really transcend those experiences.
I mean, I think the other thing is in terms of inspiring change, it's really good to be able to inspire off camera, behind the camera, as well as in the stories you choose to tell. I mean, the opportunity to show other women or people who would otherwise be disenfranchised that their stories are important and that there are ways of telling them is something that's really important to me. I mean, sometimes I try and use iconography, big iconography, that is more in the cultural phenomenon to allow an interiority to come through. So you actually see what it feels like to be the queen. Or, you know, Harry Potter is still a boy who is an orphan who is destined to a big future, and that one should embrace them. So I think you can either choose stories that enable you to advocate, or you can choose to empower people who will be role models to other filmmakers, and to show that whether you're making a really small film in black and white and 4:3, or in a huge franchise piece, that all stories are possible and they're all valid, and there are different ways and different people who can tell them.
Thank you. I mean, I just want to say Tanya is one of the most inclusive producers I work with. We are developing a project together in television, and she brought me in, and just to, you know, just help build what I do in this world, and it means everything to me. And what you just asked about, Stephanie, about inspire, that's pretty much what I live for, and what Forrest and I live for, and why we created the company. But we see it in different layers. We want to tell stories that not only inspire change, but it's also pushing out voices that need to be heard, that traditionally the business won't bet on. And once they're pushed out into the world and their films do well, and it's art meets commerce, and then they create bigger projects and bigger films that shifts the entire culture. I mean, look at what Ryan Coogler has done with Black Panther, and Chloe Zhao's first film was with us too, but look at where she is today. And, you know, and seeing Boots Riley, a revolutionary voice, to be out. Everybody was deathly afraid of his movie, right? So it's about just taking those chances. And as we build our credits in the business and our leverage, we hope to continue to do that for the underrepresented voices. And also what Tanya was saying, it's representation, not only in front of the camera, but behind the camera.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, creating all the room for men and women.
Absolutely.
I think it's a huge issue in post also. I think creating a pipeline that creates, you know, intersectional crews, both in production and in post, is huge, because when you're committed, you find great people. It's you know, the always like there's nobody, but I think it's also creating a pipeline that's really important too, and being mindful of that in editorial assistance and in visual effects, you know, all across the board. I think that's on all of us to just make sure that the support's there to bring people in.
Yeah, absolutely. That's something actually that you know, Ken and his team, my fellow producer Tamar Thomas in the UK, they hired paid trainees that wouldn't normally have access to the film industry. So they gave them an opportunity to have access to being, you know, working on a film, you know, and paid to do so. But I thought that, you know, it was very important. Inclusion is important, and I think we all have to be very intentional about, you know, opening things up, as you're saying, Stacey, you know, opening things up for people in the future, especially those who don't have access.
And making sure those people are protected once they're in positions.
Yes. Uh-huh.
And feel free to talk about anything that they encounter. I mean, I think being a really good advocate is super, and ally is really important, particularly at this moment as well, you know? I mean, every moment, but particularly now.
I love it.
I think there's a lot about, you know, Hollywood and the word power are often linked up together, even in these panels. And, you know, I think power is really about giving power. It's about handing power to other people, and eventually getting to a place that you hand that power and walk away and let the people who have it, who are that next generation, take it and hand it off themselves. And I think there's a lot of folks who try to hold on tight, but really, I think it's really all about handing it over and giving people the opportunity to have that power themselves and to do it without you ultimately.
Right. That's so, I'm totally moved. I love that. I love everything you guys are saying. What was the hardest aspect of the shows that you worked on? Like, was there a moment you were like, holy crap, this is bad, or this is challenging, or how are we going to get through that? Just like anecdotal. People love that. Who's got one?
Well, I don't know how many of you all were in COVID production, but obviously that's a very low hanging fruit in terms of a thing that makes it really hard to make your show or your movie, and to have the kind of community that you want, and to have the kind of a workspace that you want. I mean, I think there's certain things that have come out of COVID that are a mindfulness about the sort of health and well-being of your cast and crew that will hopefully be some positive lessons that we've taken away. But it would be hard to talk about production in this last couple of years without talking about the enormous challenges of trying to do all of this. And be mindful as there were surges, and we went right into production in the early stages, and being mindful of ultimately the entities that make shows and movies, they want to keep the factory open. They want to keep making things, and ultimately it comes down to the producers to be really the ones at times to say, like, nope, we've had whatever more positives this week than we had 2 weeks ago, before we actually get to a place where anybody's getting sick or getting somebody else sick. Let's just stop. And nobody ever wants to hear the word stop from a producer, but being ready, willing, and able to stop when it feels like people are at any kind of risk. I would say that's been a challenge, and saying the producers of having to really stand up ourselves to be the ones to say, like, nope, we're not going to wait for you to say we should stop. We're going to say we need to take a pause until we know that everybody is going to be okay.
Right.
Nina, I'd agree. I mean, we had to shut down, and we shut down in the early days of COVID, even though we were in New Zealand, and it was at a point when no one could even anticipate the idea that there would be a vaccine within 2 years. So we were halfway through with no sense of whether or not we would ever finish. And I think that sense of how do you make sure everyone's safe, able to get home, know that it's unfinished, try and not lose faith in the possibility that you'd be able to pull it back together again. And keep everyone committed was without a doubt the hardest thing we had. It was nothing in comparison to the people who were dying at the time. So you had to do what felt right and appropriate, and to, respect everyone's individual health and safety. We were lucky because we had backers. Netflix were behind us and were really willing and able to go the extra mile, give the crew extra pay, and support us when we were able to mount up again. But on an indie film, I don't know if it would have been as easy.
Yeah, you're speaking to us where we did not actually have to shoot during COVID, and it was such a blessing. I applaud anybody who has had to go through that. But we did have our post during the beginning and throughout 2020. And that was really challenging. It was the first time that I've ever not been able to actually sit in a room with a director and an editor and my fellow producers and actually, work through a cut and work through scenes. And it was really complicated. But, I think we're all innovative, and our post team was able to kind of figure out on the fly what was the right system. But I'm sure a lot of you have also experienced that post in a way that's not been as ideal as one would like.
Yeah, I mean, it was super challenging for Liesl, being a first-time film director, spending 1 week in total in the same room with her editor. And Stephanie is intimately aware of this because Stephen, her phenomenally talented husband, did all of the music for the film, and also she saw a bunch of these really weird Zoom screenings for friends and family. And I think that for us the biggest challenge was, again, for a first-time filmmaker, there's nothing like sitting in a room with an audience. And so we had a window over the summer pre-vaccine still, where there was a screening first in New Jersey that Liesl was able to go to. And we kind of like creeps were able to stare at them with night vision goggles, cameras that we watched the audience, but you could instantly see what you needed to do. And they could feel it in the room. And, you know, as a filmmaker, to not have the benefit before your director's cut screening, to sit in a room with your friends and family, to feel what it feels like, you know, that was incredible. But I think you're right, Nina, that you really need, and I know that you're like me, people in television that started in film, that, you know, people who do both. I think the importance of the non-writing showrunner in this time period has been more important than ever, because other people are willing to take, you know, and you as well, Stephanie, to take that risk almost to move you forward, because the showrunner, the writer showrunner is more like a director would be, and, you know, they'll push the boundaries. And I think we've all had to make the hard calls to say, no, it's not okay to get back together again, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's been weird having made Contagion to live through this time.
Unbelievable.
Yeah,
I mean, it totally came true. That's crazy.
It was like a weird special skill to have when you're like, because, you know, I was on all those committees, and our doctors are the ones who, as Soderbergh wrote the code of conduct, you know, but I think we all have a lot to be proud of, because up until Delta and pre-vaccine, I think the infection rate for the industry was less than 5%. Mm-hmm. And, you know, and everything that we all did, or what they've used to get kids back to school. So, I mean, you know, people bash on our industry a lot, but I think
And I actually thought some of the innovations during COVID, even during the screening process, were really interesting. You know, like even when you had people at home watching on their computers or their home sets, you could see their faces. I mean, it was weird, because there's a more intimate way for you to assess whether things were hitting, whether people were crying, whether people were laughing. So, you know, out of the ashes, some things rise, truly.
I wanted to say, so I think the biggest challenge is more philosophical for me. I hear it all about the COVID stuff. I was able to work on the second season of Godfather Harlem, and all the compliance was it was a struggle, but we got through it. But on when you're talking about projects career-wise, I think my biggest challenge is that constantly fighting for budget equity, acquisition equity, when it comes to narratives that star talent of color, narratives that showcases stories that come from specific cultures. And I think that is kind of the philosophical challenge I have, and constantly fighting for that, and for proper representation, and not giving in when a financier says, can you up the big, you know, the male white role in your film? And I'm like, wait, what? What do you mean? Well, if you do that, we'll give you more financing. Or can you rewrite this so there's more value for international? And that type of philosophical challenges that I've had through my career is real, still present.
Don't you get tired? Don't you get exhausted from, I mean, making a movie is hard enough. You know what I mean? Like that constant pushback, that constant just fight for what you already know is going to connect with people, because it connects with you, you know?
And also there's so many wonderful projects that has disproved disproven that is a false narrative, you know, that stories of—
That's a one-off. That's a one-off, Nina. Come on.
Or it's not a one-off. That's just, no, that's rarity. So
I mean, the structural obstacles of comps, right, which are all rooted in historical decisions that were made almost entirely by white male power structure. Yeah. And then those comps that get, when we did Crazy Rich Asians, you know, there weren't, the only comps that they could find were either romantic comedies with white people
Right.
Or Joy Luck Club. And so then there
Which
are
was
no comps.
25 years earlier.
Yes, but then the comps, like say they are a prison because they're a reflection of, say, sort of historical, structural issues in our own business. And the only way that you kind of break free of that prison is to create new comps. And yet every time you do, like you say, it gets called one-off, the exception that proves the rule. And yet so many of those comps are rooted in, they were inevitable anyway. Like, of course, a movie doesn't travel if you don't put money into traveling it. So you can't say, oh, that kind of movie doesn't travel. Of course it doesn't travel because you didn't travel with it and you didn't go out and promote it there. So you can't say that that's a, that's not a fact. It's a bias realized as a fact.
I was at one of those first screenings downtown of Crazy Rich Asians, and that audience, you couldn't even hear the dialogue. I had to see the movie again for sure, because you could not hear the dialogue.
I was there with you, Stephanie.
Oh, you were? Yeah, I was amazing.
Because everybody's so excited.
By the way, I was sobbing through the whole movie, even though it's a comedy, because I was so blown away just by seeing only Asian faces on the screen. I mean, I feel it now. It was very, very powerful. Yeah, we have to create our own comps. I love that.
But Stephanie, I feel that looking at the faces on this screen just now and thinking, particularly in the studio system, I was told, Nina, that you and Stacey, you stuck to your taste. And therefore, if you stuck to your taste, it would work. Somehow that would be enough and you'd cut through. And that was really important to me when I was starting out, to know that there were other people, other women who stuck to their taste, who didn't just say, this is a women's movie, but they made what they wanted to make, what they believed in, and that success followed that. So I think it's really important that we just remember that and that we acknowledge the paths that we've all enabled.
I love that. I love that. That's so true. Are they going to make us stop now? Wait, I think we have 5 minutes. Wrapping it up. Okay. I wanted to talk about the wardrobe because I was falling in love with all the wardrobe. I mean, those 20s dresses, Nina, were to die for. Even the 80s, the big shoulder pads, like every single movie had such a unique sense of style, which I know, it's the director, but I like to think it's the women on set that are the producers on set that are influencing that. So I'm a big fan of, I want to see the world in which I can press a button and buy that dress. That's what I'm looking for. And that's innovation. That will happen.
Can I share a quick little anecdote about Belfast? Actually, I heard that Charlotte Walter was talking to the costumier for Belfast, and she said one of the first things she did when she read the script was she has a knitting circle she comes from a place called Worcester in the middle of the UK, and she had a knitting circle, and she immediately went to this group of women and said, I'm going to give you some 60s patterns, and could you please create the granny's cardigan, and they immediately all went to work and came up with this beautiful handmade costume for the granny character, which I just thought was fabulous. Just loved the industry of that and the kind of connect.
And I loved everything the mom wore too, all those sleeves.
Fabulous. Yeah, fabulous. Thank you.
But Marcy Rogers, I got to give her a shout out for passing.
Okay.
Marcy Rogers from Chicago.
And the same for Clint Ramos, who this was his first film. He came from Broadway. He's the first costume designer of color to ever win a Tony. And what he did was astonishing. I mean, Jennifer's so stunning to begin with, but everything and all the backup stuff, his attention to period detail and his craftsmanship is just staggering.
Yeah. No.
So sorry, Rach.
Go ahead. Okay. On our film, it spanned decades and multiple costume changes, and it completely transforming Jessica into Tammy Faye. So Mitchell Travers did an unbelievable job with that, and it was just so much fun going into the warehouse and perusing everything that that I may or may not want in my own wardrobe.
Yeah, I hope everybody got a little piece of something because it was all good. Were you going to say something?
I was going to say a big shout out to Kirsty Cameron on Power of the Dog. She's a wonderful New Zealand costume designer, and she did an extraordinary job. She came to look in all the warehouses, costume houses, but there was so much production going on that there was really nothing there. So she was faced with the daunting task of having to make almost all the things that we have in our film.
Oh, wow.
Did a phenomenal job doing that. Amazing. And each of the cowboys their own little detail so that they all felt like individuals rather than
beautiful.
Yes.
Awesome. Well, look, we have to wrap it up. Thank you so much for taking the time. And our audiences, I'm sure everybody, please go out and see these movies. They're fantastic. And these are some fantastic women producers. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Stephanie. Thank you, everyone.